I thought I would come on and talk about the Rolling Stones a little bit since I was watching them on YouTube, and I'm a big fan of the Stones. A lot of people do shows on the Stones. They go to their concerts like they did this past year and tape them on their iPhones or whatever, and they post them. So I've done a few already on my channel, Dave Gold Show, and I am on YouTube. And I was just thinking about the Stones, and I was kind of like coming to some revelations about the band that started in 1962 and still goes today. Wow. Hey, hey, hey. A few things I'd like to say, if you don't mind. And even if you do, well, you can go somewhere else now. And I'm just going to go, wow. But I like to just say 62, and you go with the math to now 2025 almost in 1 week. I don't know what time in 62 they officially started, but that's what, 40, 50, 50, over 50 years now. And they started out originally with the five that we know. Brian Jones, who supposedly originated the band, and Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, who met on that at that train station and exchanged LPs and found they had a common bond. And Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman. He got Bill Wyman. I remember reading once because he had the equipment or something like that. And they started out and they got pretty big following the Beatles. The Beatles were the big British band, and I was born in the mid 50s, and I wasn't aware of them right away when they came aboard in the early 60s, but I do remember in 66 when, or 65 was it, or 66? I think 65, during 65, they released Satisfaction. And I remember listening to that song on the radio for a long time and enjoying it. And that was when I became a Stones fan. I really enjoyed that song about I can't get no satisfaction. And then about two-thirds of the way through, Mick Jagger goes, I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no girly action. And I think that was great for me. I was almost 10 years old at the time, and I was feeling like, hey, yeah, I can relate to that as a 10-year-old. And then they did other songs after that for a couple of years. And then when they did Honky Tonk Woman in 68, that had the same effect on me. I really liked the Stones a lot when they started to talk about I met a divorcee in New York City. I laid a divorcee, and she blew my nose and she blew my mind. I always loved that line. And I didn't know at the time they were maybe referring to drugs while blowing your nose with cocaine or whatever, and blowing your mind as a result. But I just envisioned a sexy lady putting a tissue in my nose and blowing my nose for me, and then taking it from there with all the tender, loving care. So then, Brian Jones was kicked out of the band in late well, mid '69, around July '69, and he tragically died a few weeks later, a few days, weeks, whatever. And then they brought in Mick Taylor, who was like 19 years old at the time, and that proved to be a big time pickup for them. He was a brilliant guitarist, and they were getting ready to go on tour in the United States, which they haven't been there in a while. And they came to the United States in '69 and really kicked ass at the end of '69. They played those concerts in Madison Square Garden that they made Get Your Yayas Out on. And that Sympathy for the Devil is one of the all-time classic rendition of that song, which they've never played it that way. Usually, or I don't, maybe a few years after that, but not as they moved along, played it like that in concert. And I always wonder why. But Mick left the band in '74. Mick Taylor, not Mick Jagger. And then they brought in Ronnie Woods, who after they did some guitar player searches. He was in Faces still, and he couldn't just easily jump aboard, but he did finally in '76. Or in '75 he came aboard, and they released the Black and Blue album, which was Ronnie's first album in '76. And Ronnie stayed with the band, and he's been with the band ever since. And he was a guy that I guess he officially never was an official member until 92, 93. When Bill Wyman quit the band, he left in '93. I guess they made Ronnie an official member. They brought in Daryl Jones to take his place, and Daryl never got membership status, but he joined the Stones like many other auxiliary players over the years. I guess Ian Stewart was a big one, Nicky Hopkins, and they in the late '60s, early '70s, they got in Bobby Keys and Jimmy Price, those two guys from Texas, and put horns in the band and Sticky Fingers and Exile Main Street, and those guys were great addition to the Stones. And live at the Marquee in '71, if you ever check that out, they had some great live moments there. They played live at the Marquee in England and London, I believe, and they were that was one of the best on tape, on camera performances you'd ever see the Stones on. They were in the Gimme Shelter and Get Your Yayas Out. That was great. And then I always remember they kind of like fell off the beaten path slightly after their Exile Main Street, and they did Goat's Head Soup and It's Only Rock and Roll, and then Black and Blue. And those were considered kind of weak albums for the Stones after that '68 to '72 heyday. And they made their comeback with Some Girls. Of course, all the lethargic time period where they were kind of like sputtering coincided with Keith's famous drug addiction with heroin and his problems with the law. He almost got arrested in Toronto, and he almost was threatened to be in jail for a long time in the band. But they got through that. They gave him community service. He came back, and in '78, they did Some Girls, which was a huge comeback. It was disco and punk elements to it, like on Shattered, and disco like on Miss You. And it was a big, big hit. And then they did Emotional Rescue, which a lot of people kind of like overlook. But I personally have that as one of my favorite albums of all time. I just love that album for some reason. It talks about New York City, and I was like in upstate New York in the late '70s, thinking about moving to New York, and I just graduated from college. I was a teacher up there, and I when I got that album, I remember playing it every morning before I went to work as a teacher. That year it came out, and they were great songs. I liked all of them basically, but She's So Cold was a great one for me. Emotional Rescue, I really enjoyed that, and then Let Me Go is one of their great rockers that people don't recognize. Dance Part One and Where the Boys Go, and what was that other one? Summer Romance and Down in the Hole, and it just was a great album that they never really got due credit for. And then they did Tattoo You in '81 with the big Start Me Up on there, and that's an anthem song that they've always used since. And they fell into kind of hard times in the '80s. They weren't really cohesive. Keith and Mick apparently had a falling out big time, and they ended up reconciling in '89 and then starting the Steel Wheels tour, which I saw out in LA in 1989, like in, I think it was November of '89. They were pretty fantastic. Guns N' Roses played ahead of them in living color. That was a great concert. I still to this day thought Guns outdid them there with Axl Rose and Slash, and they were just raw. They just jumped up there. That was before they had any of the big tech behind them. They just played, and they played their asses off. And that was after Appetite for Destruction came out, but they were awesome. They did Knocking on Heaven's Door, the Dylan song, and Guns N' Roses do a lot of good remakes. They did the McCartney song "Live and Let Die" song, "Live and Let Die," and they actually did "Sympathy for the Devil" on Vampire, the Tom Cruise film, The Vampire, whatever. I forget the title now. I tend to forget things nowadays. Too bad, but. It was a pretty good rendition, I thought, that they did. And of course, when I mentioned Knocking on Heaven's Door, they had the whole LA Coliseum clapping. We were all clapping. We were in unison. They had us hooked. Axl Rose was mesmerizing, and he was running all over the stage. And I mean, the guy was very young at the time. He was maybe in his mid-20s, the way Mick was in the late '60s when he was doing Madison Square Garden. But Mick did good. They all did good. They had a lot of good video all of a sudden, and it was a higher production value because I had seen the Stones originally in '75, and this ain't no jive. They were terrible. It was in Buffalo, New York in 1975, in August 1975. That actually was their last show of that tour. They had done Buffalo in June of '75, and apparently that was a pretty good show at the Memorial the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium indoors, but they did it outside at Rich Stadium. And I got there, and friends of mine said they're going to go see the Stones, and we got tickets and got there, and we waited and waited, and they finally came, and I was way, way in the back, and they just seemed very kind of flat and distant. Of course, they were distant. They didn't have the monitors and everything like they do nowadays, where you can see everything up pretty close, even if you're way far away. But I kind of was just really disappointed with them, and then I didn't realize it. They do stinkers along the way, and that's their trademark. So I kind of in '78, I said, I'm not going to go see them when they came back in '78. And then as I find out, when I look at Live at Fort Worth, Texas in '78, that's one of the best live albums I've ever seen of the Rolling Stones. Keith Richards is on fire. He's going berserk. It's a great, great album. Album performance. Everything they did was just crackling, guitar crackles, and Mick always was good, and they all were good. But Keith, in particular, he must have been off the juice. All of a sudden, he had to go into rehab. He was off the heroin or whatever. But he was on fire the way he played, and I loved that video. If you ever watched Live at Fort Worth, Texas '78. Just keep looking on YouTube. You'll find that you'll see the live performances. Sometimes they show you the one where you can just it's just audio, but the videos out there, all their performances, all those songs they did, fantastic. And I saw them in '81 in Syracuse, New York, and I didn't. They were okay. They had done Tattoo You, and they were doing Start Me Up and everything, and it was a lot better than '75. Let's put it that way. But wasn't until I saw them in '89 I was really impressed, and I never went to a live concert again. I had moved to New York City in the '90s, and they played a couple times in the Meadowlands. They renamed it now, the Giant Stadium and everything. But on the uh, Love Is Strong tour, they did, and then they did the other tour after that, Babylon tour. And I never went to see him again, but I liked it in the early 2000s. They did 40 Licks. That was a pretty good album. For some reason, it was fresh, and they they did that Bigger Bang album, and then they kept doing their tours, and they had that Monumental tour in Cuba. I've never been to Cuba. No band has ever been there, and they did a great job. And I like that. It's on concert. I did like a video or a documentary on it, and um, they just keep touring and they keep coming around. And this year, it's no exception. Of course, they lost Charlie Watts a few years back. Charlie, it was kind of devastating, and they did it. I was looking on YouTube last night at one video. Someone's Bill Wyman or somebody said, I don't know why they didn't break up at that time. I said, why? I commented, why should they break up? Jagger and Richards are the songwriters, and they got the band still. They got Ronnie. Ronnie is a official Stone, and then of course they always had Chuck Leavell with the band, and they had auxiliary players that they never are official Stones, but they've always contributed greatly. And the Stones, I remember them doing the Super Bowl in Detroit. It was on TV, and they were pretty damn good. They went out there, they played, I think, Sad, 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 or they played Start Me Up, and then they did Sad, 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 and then Satisfaction. And they were good. And of course, the Stones always are the real thing. There's no fakery there. They just play live, and whether they're good or bad or indifferent, it's them playing, and they pulled it off quite well. And there's always a little documentary they had where they show the Stones afterwards getting on that golf cart and being taken back into the bowels of Detroit Stadium. And I don't see that anymore. I can't find that anymore, but that's kind of cool. They're kind of like patting each other's on the back. They go, yeah, I think that was great. You can see the adrenaline rush they had from doing it. It was quite interesting and revealing that these guys, they love to play, they love to perform, and of course, I was reading they're so damn rich they don't have to do that for that reason, but they did have a lot of umph, and they're still going today, which is amazing. And the thing that really got me thinking about doing this right now on the spot was I was thinking about like the heart and soul of the Stones. If I was talking to Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, and I'm just like a nobody interviewer, but if I had a chance, they had to take my questions, and it'd be nice. I'd say, Keith, Mick, you two guys are undoubtedly the heart and soul of the Stones. $1 million question. Who's the heart? Who's the soul? That's an interesting question. What do you think? It's interesting in a way because, I bet you can answer it either way. And that's very true. The heart and the soul of the Stones. As long as those two guys are around, they'll keep going. I'm sure. Inevitably, it's going to be over someday. And this past year, you never know. You could have been the last time we've seen them play live. I thought they were going to announce that they're going to do something in Europe early in 2025, or not early, but in the spring and into the early summer, how they usually done their tours of late. I haven't heard anything yet, so it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that whole concept of heart and soul. But then I kind of use baseball or sports, like the most valuable player. And obviously, if you were talking about the most valuable player of the Stones, and they give it out every year, like they give it in sports, there were different most valuable players along the way. Probably early on in the early 60s when they just started, probably Brian Jones would have gotten a couple of those. And then it's funny, when Mick Taylor came along, he was just there from 69 to 74. I was thinking he would have won. And that would be his very first year with the Stones, because he came aboard and he just turned that band around big time with his playing, and they went on concert. They were kicking ass. And I think I would give it to him that 1 year for sure. I don't think Keith and Mick would argue that. But then it's funny when we talk about Ronnie Wood, he would have won multiple MVPs. And not to forget Charlie. Charlie would have had one or two thrown in there along the way. But Ronnie really was an important addition to the Stones, and he really came through big time, especially in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, and kind of keeping the Stones together. Keith and Mick always seemed to like Ronnie, or they could play off of him, and they had their different relationships. But Ronnie is very, very malleable or flexible, or blends in. He's just like, he was meant to be a Stone. If I always said after Mick Taylor left, they could have gone to Central Casting in Hollywood and get the next Rolling Stone. And Ronnie Wood was right there. He just looks the part. He plays the part. He doesn't play as good as Mick Taylor, but he plays a lot of different roles in the band. He's very versatile, and I don't think Mick Taylor ever did those things. And Mick Taylor seemed to come out of his shell many years later when we see him now, but he was kind of like just this young kid who was in the band, and that's all he was there to do, was to play, man. I'm just playing, and he didn't have much of a personality. He didn't talk too much, and I guess he got hooked on the drugs and heroin or whatever, and he had to quit the band. And he claimed he got ripped off on songwriting rights, but he contributed obviously to some of those songs, like on Goat's Head Soup and on It's Only Rock and Roll. But Keith and Mick are the writers. Jagger Richards, it's like Lennon and McCartney. You just keep those guys on top, and always one guy maybe contribute more than the other for a song, but they both get the same credits. And I guess Mick didn't understand that. I think Keith referred to that once when he was a too nice, commenting on Mick Taylor. Mick Taylor didn't learn his lesson, or he didn't learn a lesson about there's a big difference between a lead guitar player and a guitar player writes songs, and like himself. And those guys who started out not writing any songs. I saw Mick Jagger introduce the Beatles into the Hall of Fame. I saw that on YouTube the other day, and he was saying, "Wow, those guys were writing songs. They wrote us the first song," and we said, I had to say to myself, they were in these leather coats that they were down to down to their knees or ankles or whatever. They're splendid coats, and he goes, if I want to get one of those, I'm going to have to start writing myself some songs. I guess he was pushed along with Keith to write songs by that Andrew Logum or whatever. And they did, and they started writing songs. And I mean, that's the main thing. I mean, band couldn't be lasting today if they didn't write so many damn good songs. And they've written like well over 400 big time songs. And they don't even know which ones to use on concerts. They have their staple of what they're going to use, but it's pretty interesting, the whole dynamic of the Rolling Stones, and I've really enjoyed them over the years, and I still do. I appreciate them, and I had mixed emotions about the Stones, like in '89. That's what they wrote that. It seemed to be very autobiographical between Keith and Mick. You're not the only one with mixed emotions. You're not the only ship adrift on the ocean. Some great lines Mick Jagger wrote over the years. I think he's written most of the lyrics, but Keith must be the composer or the big guy with the music, getting everything together. And I guess Chuck LaBelle's been giving credit for that over the years with the songs the Stones already have, just to coordinate which ones they're going to use and how they're going to play them, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I think I covered about everything I wanted to cover on the Stones. If I missed anything, you can leave a comment if you're able to do so. But I'm pretty happy with this little piece, and I'm going to share it with my niece. So I look at the time, it's almost 26 minutes now. And I used to do the Dave Gold Show for many years, 20 years, Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I did 600 shows, and they started out as 29 minutes, but then they were pared down to 28 minutes. And I kind of I don't know. I just jumped in, and I almost got a full live show that I would do back then in the day, or time it, and it just seems to work out nice for me. So, with that being said, well, thank you if you're watching live. If not, I hope you're watching this now that I've recorded it and I'm posting it, and tell me what you think. I don't know if they leave comments here. Sometimes they just take it on their own accord to say there's no comments available, or that I don't have the choice to leave comments or to have people leave comments. But if I have a choice, I say please leave them. Hopefully, you won't be some troller who's just hateful and just trying to just tear people apart. But that's the case, so be it. All right, everyone. That's about it. And I'm trying to end it right on 20 now, starting now. So, yeah, we're getting close to New Year's Eve where you had the big countdown. And they always hit it when there's like a minute left. Everyone just comes to life. They show it on TV and everything. So we're almost done here. So I am Dave Sweeney, a.k.a. Dave Gold. And watch my station, my YouTube station. And thank you for watching here. Thank you very much. And that's it. Sayonara for now. Holy cow.